Hello, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Wold, Editor-in-Chief of Chain Drug Review and Mass Market Retailers. Welcome to our video forum. Today, we're thrilled to have as our guest Wendy Liebmann, CEO and Chief Shopper at WSL Strategic Retail. Wendy, welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wendy, WSL has spent many years studying the shopper. How have expectations of shoppers changed during the COVID pandemic?
You know, a couple of key things have happened during the pandemic. One, shoppers around this country have really been forced to focus on what's important in their lives today. Not just issues around health and wellness, but work-life balance, stress, really key issues around fairness and values that, while many of those were sort of in the works prior to the pandemic, obviously the pandemic has accelerated all of that thinking and their assessment of really what's important. The other part of it is that they've really taken advantage of many of the vehicles at their fingertips that existed before the pandemic, and whether that's technology, whether it's the way they were dabbling with shopping, whether it's categories, and whether it's categories they weren't really thinking about much anymore. So you've had this total realignment in many ways. You know, a pandemic quickly focuses the mind, and that's exactly what's happened with shoppers.
And how have retailers responded to the shifting mindset of shoppers?
Yeah, I think to retail's credit, especially the essential retailers in the mass areas, they responded really quickly in terms of how do I get what people need right now to them safely, efficiently, whether it was in a storefront, you know, in the store, or whether it was actually digitally. And I think it's remarkable what retailers have done to create different ways for people to shop: order online, pick up in store, home delivery, all of those things. I mean, everyday retailers, not just, you know, fancy, you know, Amazon's in the room kind of retailers. So I think they've done a lot around that. I do think, however, that we are now at that moment in time where they have to dig deeper and think much more differently as retailers about what shoppers want next, not just what shoppers wanted with their immediate needs.
You've said in your research that shoppers are seeking an easier, meaningful, well life. What implications will that have for mass market retailers in the US and around the world?
You know, I think particularly in the US, we think about easy as almost as a real estate play. Easy is on every corner. Yes, of course, now we add in e-commerce and digital, and so we, you know, that becomes easy delivered to my door. But I think what retailers, particularly in the US, have to understand, because it's in the US where we've had this sort of scale that we could open more doors and more doors and more doors. What they really have to understand now is what easier really means. Easier isn't just being, you know, on a street corner. Easier now is what's that overall experience when I walk down the aisle, the way I merchandise things, the people who help me in the store, the variety of tools I can use to shop and as well as inform myself. So I think the big opportunity and challenge for mass retailers in particular is to think about easy in every possible nuance of what easy means. And I think that's the same with manufacturers and product and information on packaging and all of those kinds of things. So I think that's really important now. It's not just about being able to, you know, order online and, you know, deliver to somebody or pick up. I think that's really, really important. Meaningful is this really broad focus around the sort of values shoppers have now, and they had them before, but they really have them now, which is, are you a trustworthy company? Are you concerned about my safety? Do you think about me? So all that personalization work retailers talk about, people are really saying, no, it's about me now, not about you and how you think about personalization. So I think that's another piece to what meaningful means. It also means, are you a good company for me to spend my money with? Are you taking care of your community and your people? That's what we saw through the pandemic. Companies that took care of their people, either on the front line of retail or in organizations during the pandemic, shoppers are really registering those things now. You know, do I trust you to be meaningful, not only to me, but to the people who work for you? So that's another value that's really important. And then I think the well piece is really, again, sort of parsing it all out. It's not just my health, I'm sick, how do I, get healthier? It's that notion of, well-being, mental, emotional, environmental, all of those issues that now people are questioning and challenging, because not only do we have a pandemic, we have a global crisis in terms of climate, we have economic issues. So that notion of financial, physical, mental well-being, the sort of whole story is really what shoppers are asking for now. That's hard because it's very different from the right product, the right price right now.
Absolutely, yeah. You mentioned personalization. How good a job are retailers doing today, and where do you think this is going to go in terms of personalization? What will that mean to you or me as a consumer in a few years down the road?
Yeah, I think, today we still think about personalization, or retailers tend to, in terms of, what do you buy, the sort of algorithm of what you buy and what's the right deal for you when, that sort of thing. And to me, it's still very transactionally based rather than understanding the whole me and, as a retailer, what I can provide there in terms of supporting whole lifestyle. So I do think the big issues moving forward are abilities to customize the offer, the mix of product, how localized it is, how localized and supportive your store is as part of my community, sort of my store. So I think there's a lot, all of the things I'm talking about feel very emotional, and there's a tendency, in retail to be quite transactional. I get it. But shoppers have moved past that. So when we talk about personalization, it is no longer good enough just to offer me a deal on products I buy. It needs to be all about my store, my relationship. Do you see the whole me, the whole shopper? And can you deliver goods and services around that?
So this will have a lot more to do with information and communication than, as you say, just a plain transaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's well said.
WSL is known for its retail safaris, where you go around the world and look for innovators. To what extent have retailers in this country and abroad been able to continue to innovate despite the challenges of the COVID pandemic?
I just marvel at what's been going on. There's the immediacy of innovation that we saw. How do we, provide basic goods and services to people? And that by itself, we cannot undervalue what retail in this country and around the world has done. But I've found it remarkable in all our work that we do personally, or our scout team does around the world, to see what's going on. And I think it's in big fancy flagships, and it's in small functional retailers that we know well. It's the the 7-Eleven new concept and lab they're testing out of Dallas, where they're taking the notion of speed, ease, on a street corner, come and get your Slurpee, and translating that with both technology and new healthier forms of food and faster ways to shop, sort of rethinking the whole notion of convenience in this new world, and using that learning lab to then, send out that learning to their many thousands of stores, certainly around the US. I think, small format retailers, the Aldis of the world, the Dollar Generals of the world, who are doing an extraordinary job about recognizing that small, convenient, easy, and relatively safe formats on local formats are really very relevant to people now. And so, improving the level of the way they merchandise the store, or the fresh offer, or the healthier products they have in the store. I think that's really these everyday retailers doing extraordinary work in that. And then, always have to mention, as I always say, the big river in the room, Amazon, and just mind-boggling whether they're getting it right or not. But, all the testing they're doing around Amazon Fresh and Go, and taking a traditional supermarket like Fresh and, turning it slightly on its ear with limited offer, but more technology, integrating all of their technology and physical tools,
Mhm.
to create new shopping experiences. So I think we're seeing all of that.
Mhm.
And there's a lot going on in healthcare
Mhm.
as well. In the US, I think, Rite Aid with their new RX evolution
Mhm.
concept is, to their credit, they've had an awful lot on their plate. And, their level of innovation in creating, new and old forms of health and wellness. But we see it around the world. We see it a
Mhm.
lot going on in the UK, India, Australia, Asia. I mean, just tremendous amount of innovation, which combines technology, customer experience, innovative products, trust values that shoppers are looking for, all emerging very quickly as we re-emerge, hopefully, out of a pandemic.
Would you agree that companies like Walmart and Target have also done a fairly remarkable job in
Yeah.
changing their business model?
Yeah, and I think absolutely, that's absolutely right to mention them, because there's really big boxes.
Mhm.
And what it is I remark of the small things, and I give you a perfect example. If you
Mhm.
walk into the frozen aisle at Target, it doesn't sound very innovative, right? But there on the door of the frozen pizza, door,
Mhm.
cabinet door, are all the options of how I can buy.
Mhm.
So I'm there in the aisle and I'm cold and I'm opening the door, but then it says, you can order this online and pick it up at at the curb.
Mhm.
You can, order it and we'll deliver it to you within set number of hours. It's saying to shoppers, any way you want it. Stand here in the chill or we'll bring it to you. And
Mhm.
I think sometimes those small things show how shopper-centric they are. And
Mhm.
then Target as an example, of course, all the new partnerships they're doing, whether it's with Ulta or Apple or Disney, I think
Mhm.
extraordinary things there. And Walmart on the other side, when you think about how they've built out their marketplace,
Mhm.
all their e-commerce work, obviously all the delivery options they're creating. And I think for Walmart, the other thing that's been particularly interesting is sort of the behind the scenes, how they're integrating the merchandising, both e-commerce and in-store. It's very shopper-centric in the sense of, just because I buy it here or there doesn't mean it should be totally different messages to me. And I
Mhm.
think Walmart's done a very good job on that.
What are your thoughts on the supermarket sector?
I actually think the supermarket sector, not only are they perfectly positioned in this new world of health and wellness and because shoppers are now looking at what they eat and, in me, on me. But I do think because it's still Walmart aside and maybe Target aside, I think the regional grocers in particular have done an extraordinary job of not only innovating with all their services, but creating that sort of local connection to their communities. And so we could roll them all off. But
Mhm.
I think almost to a one,
Mhm.
they have done an extraordinary job during the pandemic of building that kind of level of trust. And I see the levels of innovation that they're doing around purpose and sustainability and value proposition and just really foundational connections back to their communities. So I
Mhm.
think they've done an amazing job, and I would give them sort of the A+ in all of this.
You mentioned technology as one common thread that we're seeing in a lot of this innovation. Are there other things that are sort of unifying the innovation efforts, or are people going off in a lot of different directions at this point?
Yeah, no, I think that technology as the enabler, not technology for technology's sake, which is
Mhm.
always the danger, is definitely a platform that everybody's embracing and trying to figure out how to integrate it and integrate it profitably
Mhm.
into their retail offers. I think the other things are the purpose-driven companies, retailers and manufacturers that are really stating very clearly what their purpose is as a company, whether
Mhm.
that's around, supporting their own people and inclusiveness, whether it's, sustainability and broader values, whether it's health and wellness for both their consumers, the shoppers, and their people, their own internal people. I think that's a common thread. You know, work life, my people, as well as the people who buy from me. That's a common thread of really successful retailers. And as I say, from Aldi to flagships like Selfridges in the UK, we're seeing a lot of that. And then I think the other piece is innovative ways to approach categories. So, you know, retailers like John Bell and Croydon in the UK, part of a bigger chain, but in their pharmacy, drugstore format, you know, the way they're thinking about nutrition and immunity, and not just lining it up on a, you know, on the shelf, but actually bringing it forward in ways that are relevant and easy again, and meaningful and well for shoppers to buy. So I think we're seeing those who are looking at categories differently, beauty retailers who are bringing in more health related categories like Mecca in Australia, which is a big beauty company, a specialty retailer, who's now adding things like naturopathic services, naturopaths and fertility clinics and things like that, which you'd say, this is a cosmetics retailer. What are they doing with that? Their view of whole health and women's health is much broader. And so I think it's all of those things. Yes, it's technology, it's purpose, and it's also innovative ways to think about categories and services that are relevant to shoppers now.
And are retailers beginning to sort of curate the assortment, if you will, to if we're going to put it on our shelves, we believe in these products, rather than, well, we'll just put everything we can out there?
Not as much as they should be. You know, they are beginning to think about it for a number of reasons. One is, how do big retailers or any retailers differentiate themselves when there's so much commoditization of product out there and brands? So there's this beginning notion of curation and the role of things like private brand or exclusive brand. So that's part of it. But yes, also I think this more and more we're seeing this kind of localization, and that's somewhat what we were talking about in personalization. But how do I know that I've got not just a younger audience or mums or African American audience or whatever coming to my stores? How do I think about attitudes, not just demographics? And how can I deliver that? And I think the retailers who are getting it right are much more sensitive to those differences. And that's where you're starting to, the first thoughts around curation are emerging.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yes, exactly. Because it's not very efficient. And that's the big challenge for retail efficiency and cost structure. It's not so easy to do.
But it is a way to differentiate yourself from the everything store, right?
Exactly. Thank you. That's exactly. And more important, you know, as you look at price value and, you know, the issues around price structure when you compete with an Amazon, if you work with Amazon, you know, and compete with Amazon, it's a challenge. How do you do it? And product and services are often ways to do that, where you're really adding value and values.
A couple of final questions for you, Wendy. In light of everything we've been talking about, what advice would you give to drug chains, discounters, and supermarkets here in the US as they look to adapt to a changing landscape?
Yeah, I think one is, don't assume. And that sounds really flip of me. But as shoppers today talk about what's important to them, it's really easy for us to use sort of old world assessment. What does easy mean? And yet you really need to dig deeper into what shoppers are talking about, because these are really meaningful changes that they are now making in their life. And they're also very concerned and frustrated by the level of fairness in so many levels: price, caring about my community, caring about the people who work for you. So there are a lot of levers in all of that that really require staying very close, not just looking at transactional data, and not even just big shopper segments of data that we all, you know, have access to now. So there's a lot of nuance in that one. I think the second thing is, don't assume it's all about e-commerce. Yes, it is in many ways, but the role of the physical place, the physical store, we've seen this as things have opened up. People are missing that level of personal engagement. And so the ability to have a real understanding of what the physical versus the digital means to shoppers now is really important. Again, don't assume that just by having a website, a .com there, that's going to be enough in the whole proposition. And I would say the third is be very clear, transparent, and honest about what your values are as a company, because shoppers are feeling very, I won't say disenfranchised, but we're just doing some new work that will be published in the next week. And it's very clear in that work that shoppers have really, putting manufacturers and retailers to the test in terms of saying, you say you do this, but do you really? Whether it's about sustainability or, inclusiveness or the quality of product or any of those things. So I would say they're the three things that retailers really need to think about. And then they just you cannot think about one store of the future anymore. You have to innovate often and always, and think about the best retailers use their one store, their flagships, and then use all that learning to sort of send out through all of their stores. They can't wait for one perfect store. It's just not going to be anymore. So that's the other piece, remember, the store of the future is every store.
And is the industry moving quickly enough to keep pace with the shopper?
I don't believe they are. I think the shopper is moving very fast. But I will say this, what the pandemic has done, certainly for the mass retail community, has created a tremendous opening and level of trust, because it's the drugstores, the grocery stores, the mass merchants, the dollar store, the dollar store, small format, that really have served the broader US community really well during the pandemic, whether it's food or vaccines. And I think that's an opportunity that we as an industry can take advantage of, but we've got to get on with it, because memories are short. So move on, onward and upward.
Absolutely. Have to seize the day.
Yeah.
Anyway,
exactly.
Wendy, this has been wonderful. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
A pleasure, Jeff, as always. Thank you.